was a lot of talk of the 25th Amendment throughout the course of Donald Trump's years, generally coming from people outside of his administration, wishing that after one or another of the insane either comments or Sharpie marks on a whiteboard or seemingly treasonous activities, that his cabinet would do the right thing and remove him from power. That never seemed to have any chance of actually happening. But it turns out that at one point, there was apparently a little bit of talk inside of the administration of that happening. This is coming about, as so many bits of news are this week, from ABC News' Jonathan Karl, who reports that in the aftermath of January 6th, during which 5 people died, at least 2 cabinet secretaries asked Mike Pence, who had been holed up in the Capitol as rioters were hunting for him, to convene a cabinet meeting to discuss it. Pence did not do so. So let's just bear that in mind. No matter how many of the threats were coming Pence's way on the 6th, in the wake of the 6th, he will never do anything to oppose Donald Trump. But the Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin talked to other cabinet members about using the 25th Amendment that night on the 6th, the day of the attack. He also brought it up the next day too. And Karl reports that Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State at that point, asked for a legal analysis of the process for invoking the 25th Amendment. Karl writes that the analysis determined that it would take too much time, considering that Trump only had 14 days left in office and any attempt to forcefully remove him would be subject to legal challenge, which, look, it makes sense. And it doesn't seem as if you should be able to remove the president in like 5 minutes. But seemingly it's supposed to be like the last resort if the president has totally lost it. And now we're learning, no, it would still take weeks, I guess. So let's hope he never gets like, I don't know, trigger happy with the nukes or anything, Brett.
My vague recollection of the significance of the 25th Amendment is like if the president has been shot in the head and no longer do the neurons work, or let's say they're slightly more down the road of whatever was happening to Reagan than Reagan when it was happening. I love that. I love these guys checking in because it's definitely symbolic of the relationship that they had, obviously, when Trump was president. You have people like Mnuchin who are like, listen, I'm actually in the wealthy class of people, and wealthy people respect it and admire me. And I'm only here to have you in power as long as you give tax breaks to my kind of people. Yeah. And all those folks definitely do have like secure footing against the dissolution of America as we know it. And a lot of them are looking into ways to end it. But they don't get any credit, or as Anna says, they don't get any cookies, because it took until that moment when they realized that democracy was about to fall apart. And I don't think I'm not saying that they needed to step up and remove the president for that reason, apart from all others, or at all. I think along the way, they needed to stand up and fight against the attack on democracy that he had launched in essence and repeatedly throughout his entire presidency. It's just like there they find themselves, like super hot frogs in slowly boiling water. Yeah. Well, but as you point out, kind of frogs that see other frogs in hot water because they're not really feeling the heat necessarily. Like I think people like Mnuchin would probably be perfectly happy with someone like Biden in office, assuming that they didn't raise taxes, they didn't increase government spending. They don't want the world to be riven by crazy maniacs. They just also don't want a single cent ever to be taken away from them in any way. And look, I think you're right. This is at the end of the day all about cookies, because it's not about consequences. Like nothing's gonna happen to Trump based on this. So what you have is belated information, thanks to people like Jonathan Karl, who have so many of these bits of information and wait so long for us to find out about it. And so then we have to evaluate, so is Mnuchin better now? Pompeo was asking about it. Is that a good thing for Pompeo? Hey, Betsy DeVos and Elaine Chao might have supported the 25th supposedly, but they both resigned. So we'll never know. So are we supposed to be like impressed? Or this last little bit of information. When Secretary of Defense Mark Esper told Jonathan Karl that his goal was to prevent the use of the military against American citizens during the quote, the days before, the day of, and the days after
the election, saying that he was worried that Trump was going to use the Insurrection Act to send the military all over the country because of the protests. And remember, like, I think the insurrection took up a lot of the oxygen that previously had been focused on. There were months where Trump was regularly saying that he was going to send troops to Portland and stuff, and to Buffalo or whatever. People were being grabbed off the street and thrown into, Kias and things like that. So he's saying, I was very worried about this. Trump was gonna do it. I was focused on stopping it. So do we take that seriously? Is it opportunistic? Does he get cookies? What do you think?
No, none of them get cookies. None of them get cookies. I mean, Esper's the one, I guess, who gets some kind of cookies, like the generals who sat there. But like when you find yourself relying on the generosity of generals, like that's when you know it's a giant mistake. And a lot of them, I know he's defense secretary, but like that arm protecting us from the president's use of crazy force. Like you look at how countries devolve into chaos and insanity, and honestly, it sucks because like I looked at these stories and I thought to myself this morning, like, ugh, I don't want to do it today, not today. But I don't know if that's responsible because there's so many damn stories about January 6th, which are, season 1 of Game of Thrones. You're like, oh my God, that's awesome. Like, but this feels like season 5 of like the third time a different studio tried to find some kind of property vaguely fantasy based like Game of Thrones. And they think the through line is just do the craziest stuff.
Sure.
And I'm desensitized to it and sad, but like that is also, and I've said this for years on your show, like part of what makes like I guess crazy like dictators so effective and gives them their power is that they're crazy and they do insane things that are so off the charts. And to be someone who is a president of the United States, where like not even Mitch McConnell, not even half the other people, not even the crazies of the crazies were like, all right, let's do this. Let's do a coup. Let's do whatever we got to do. And not let the peaceful transfer of power, the one thing that Americans typically like say, oh, that's a bridge too far if you want to stop the peaceful transfer of power. None of them stepped up until the last minute, and they knew this is where it was headed. And Trump always was, whether it's him nakedly pursuing power or just seeing where his boundaries are like a child, he's gonna keep going. You have to do something about it.
Yeah. No, you're right. You have made the point about the craziness for a while, and I think we have tried consciously for years to try to ward off the normalization of every insane thing that you can imagine and lots of things that you couldn't. That only works so hard. Like, some of the fellowship knew that the ring was trying to corrupt them. That doesn't mean they can resist it. Like there are things that have been normalized for us. We've covered 3 of these stories here in our A block. I covered 1 or 2 more in the pre-show, but there was a bunch of others that have come out in the past day or two that we're not gonna get to, and we're gonna move on. Remember, when a congressman had a video of him murdering AOC, that's gone from the news. So like it sucks that these things get normalized because it's not just history. Trump is not done. I wish that he was, but he's not. And again, it comes down to cookies because it's not coming down to consequences. Esper will probably never testify about this. Maybe Meadows will, but Trump is still gonna be able to run, and he is still as eager to regain power through whatever means possible or necessary. For more political news breakdowns, interviews, stories of activism, and me trying my hardest to care about the occasional big celebrity news story, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/thedamagereport. And you can ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss anything.